I mean, now that I look back on it, it's like people 101, but everybody's different. Everybody needs something different. You can't manage and lead every person the exact same way. And I learned that one early on, probably a rough way, right? Like I wanted to manage at a very young age, probably the age of 23, 24, became a manager for the first time with no management experience and wanted to manage everybody the same way. And it just did not go well.
That would have been
But,
convenient though, right? To only have to
oh,
learn one approach and one
yeah,
cookie cutter, and then you could just replicate it.
yeah, it would be nice, but it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't
But
like that.
for young leaders and managers out there, I talk to them all the time. I tell them like that's one of the very first concepts you got to learn, that you're gonna have to put time into this. And you're gonna have to understand that Josh needs something different, Lori needs something different. Like there's different ways you have to talk to them, interact with them, how you communicate with them.
Welcome to the People Powered Solutions podcast. In this show, you'll gain expert advice and tips on building a thriving workplace culture with happy employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the People Powered podcast. Today, folks, we are continuing our Secret Sauce series, the series that we showcase companies who, when it comes to creating a highly thriving workplace culture, when it comes to creating a work environment where people feel seen, heard, and valued, they have clearly understood the assignment and are delivering just on that. We want to help organizations out there understand little tips, tricks, strategies that they can be implementing the minute they're done listening to the show in order to themselves take ownership and start to ignite their very own culture transformation. Today, we welcome Joshua Skeens from Logically. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have a conversation. Listeners, before we start recording normally, I always do a bit of a fit check with our prospective guests because we want to make sure that we are bringing you the cream of the crop when it comes to some of these companies that we do showcase. And rest assured, from my very brief conversation with Josh, Logically and Josh, the CEO of Logically, are definitely fitting that bill. So Josh, before we start deep diving into some of the stuff that you believe are enabling, some of the things that are enabling you to attract and keep the talent you need to succeed as a company, let's first help our audience understand how Joshua got to doing what Joshua does today.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me, Lori. But came to Logically about 3 years ago through way of acquisition. Previously, had worked at a cybersecurity company for about 15 years. We grew that business from 4 people, really bootstrapped. Founder owned, founder led with his wife, and grew it to 70 people. And Logically bought us as part of an acquisition spree in March of 2021, and then kind of fast tracked the career through Logically too. Quickly became the COO, and then 11 months later became the CEO. So it's been a wild ride from a Logically standpoint.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you've had a long career to date. Before we delve into, some of the things that Logically is doing really well, let's talk about maybe some of the workplace cultures that you might have worked for. Of course, you're not naming any names, you're not naming any companies, but maybe let's talk briefly about some of the cultures that you have been exposed to, be it yourself or just through interactions that you knew were toxic, and what are some of the signs or symptoms that told you that they were toxic?
Yeah, I think that probably unfortunately all of us have those experiences at some point in time, right? And some of those signs early on that I've been a part of is working for environments where you can tell that it's not really people oriented, that everything is just about the business and nothing else. And don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, and I'll probably touch on this later, business is about making money and being profitable and things like that. That's the reason why we're all in business today. But if that is your driving force, that is a very toxic work environment as well. So I've been a part of that, unfortunately, been a part of family, not my family, but other family led businesses where there is there's a toxicity to that can happen as well, where a lot of times they think like family owned businesses, it's all about the family, but there needs to be a really drawn line there where business is really business. And, I even fell prey to early on in my career. I would talk about, hey, we're a family. Business really isn't a family. My mindset has shifted over the years about that. And you can be friends. It can feel a little bit like family, but when you create this family culture and you're trying to hold people together because, hey, it's a family, like to me, that is more toxic than it is beneficial. And it's been interesting in my mind to walk that over probably the last 10 years of, you know what, this isn't truly a family. Like there are some family aspects to it, but you shouldn't really like try to keep people in a singular spot because, hey, this is a family environment.
And I could see that, but I want to play a bit of a devil's advocate here because I feel like when it comes to your family, they're the people you can be 100% your authentic selves with. When you think about, they say you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. So, in my mind, a thriving workplace culture is a culture that people feel they can bring their whole selves to work. They can be 100% themselves. They have bad days, and there's this level of understanding and vulnerability that we're all human. We're all here having a human experience, and we will have mistakes, and we will kind of have some behavior hiccups, and that's okay because that's who we are. So I guess I get what you're saying from like the family per se, to keep people there because we're all a family. Yes, but I think what we're trying to replicate with that thriving culture is that family feeling, the feeling that we can be ourselves, right? And
A
it's
100%. Oh,
yeah.
yeah, 100%. What I would say is you can choose your family. You can't choose your blood.
Oh, I like that. Yes, I like that.
So,
And your family's not always blood.
blood.
Like that. Okay. Okay, I like that. So let's now fast forward to Logically and the Logically family. You said you came over as part of an acquisition. So let's talk about transitions, mergers, acquisitions. They always entail a number of hurdles, hiccups, some things more than hiccups often. Let's talk a bit about the transition and what you observed.
It was difficult, you know, going through an acquisition and being a part of an organization that had done 12 acquisitions, right? So you had really 12 different cultures that were still kind of in play there. And what I tell people is like when you go through an acquisition of a company, is people really go through grief, right? They go through every stage of grief,
Yeah.
and some go through it quicker, some don't go through it at all, some get hung up in a stage of grief and they can't move forward. And I try to allow people to go through that and coach them through go through grief the way that you need to go through grief. But if you find yourself in a spot where you have not gotten on the other side of it and you're now fully dedicated to this is my place and I want to be here, then you probably need to go do something else because it's not going to get any better because it's not going back to the old way.
Yeah.
And what I've seen through being here for the last almost 3 years is that you will run into people that are they are still reminiscing and wanting it to go back. There's nothing wrong with reminiscing about the old days, right? Or the good old days. Most times though, the days that we're in will then become the good old days at some point in time.
Ah,
Um, but if you're stuck saying I want to go back and I need it to go back to the way that it was, then you're probably in the wrong place.
absolutely. And when you say do you remind them that today one day will be the good old days?
I say that all the time to people.
I love that. I love that. You talked about 12 acquisitions. That's pretty significant. Maybe for the benefit of our listeners, can we talk a bit more really quickly about what is Logically?
Yeah, so Logically is a cybersecurity company, managed services company. We're known as an MSP, a managed services provider, or an MSSP, managed security services provider. And we provide cybersecurity solutions, IT solutions to businesses of all size. And, you know, my team probably gets tired of hearing me saying it, but like we're first and foremost a customer service company. So like we're a customer service company that happens to do cybersecurity and happens to do IT. We're not like a cybersecurity company that has like some flavor of, yeah, we provide you customer service. Like we live and die customer service. Like that's what we're about.
Nice.
And there's a big difference because that doesn't really happen in our market a lot.
Okay. So what would be preventing it from happening elsewhere?
I think that people feel like they're a technology company first and foremost. And the world is literally about customer service and relationships. It's about people. And that gets lost sometimes in business. I give this example a lot of times of an oil change. Like if I want to go get my oil change in my car, I have thousands of options. So if I go down the street to get my oil change and I don't have a great customer service experience, I'll just go to the next one down the block. And there's 83,000 plus businesses that somewhat look and smell like Logically. So if we don't provide them a great experience, they're just going to go someplace else.
I love it. I love it. And I think that spills over into your internal management of your people, understanding and appreciating that people are at the forefront of all you do, be it an external transaction for the business. It sounds like understanding that all things are people centered and then bringing that mindset internally are probably one of the reasons that Logically has such a healthy culture, right?
Yeah,
Um, Go ahead.
I would say that's true. I mean, we're people are everything to us.
People are everything to you. And when we were talking last, Joshua, you talked a lot about just your ethos and you as a leader. Would you mind sharing kind of the mindset that you brought to Logically in terms of leadership and what you believed your role as a leader was within Logically?
Yeah, for sure. So like my ethos, and I feel like it's probably been that for 10, 15 years now. And it wasn't prior to that, right? Like I was self-taught manager, a lot of bumps along the road. Like we all learn and mature. Well, I guess I shouldn't say we all learn and mature because some of us don't learn and mature, but hopefully we do. But luckily I was blessed to learn and mature along the way. But my ethos is that number one, I want to develop you personally and professionally to where you can go get a job anywhere. I never want to have an employee where they go get a job someplace else and that business is like, man, I can't believe I hired this person. I want them to be so ecstatic that they have this person. And I can't do that with everybody leading an organization of 400 plus employees, but like that's what we're striving towards culturally. And I'm trying to drive that down to my other leaders to have that same mindset as well. Second for me though is I want to create a culture where you never want to leave, where you want to be with me for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So then I really put you in conflict of, well, do I want to leave or do I want to go or what do I, where am I at? But honestly, Lori, I've had many discussions over the last 3, 4 years where employees have come in and said, hey, I had this great opportunity, but I don't want to leave. And I've just point blank told them, you need to leave, right? You need to go. Like this is a life-changing opportunity. This is something better for your career. And every one of those people have left. Some of those people have come back. And it's not because I asked them to come back, but it's because they went and tried it and they just said, hey, this thing's not for me. But others have gone on and flourished. And like, that's what I get, a lot of pride about when people leave the business and they go and flourish, which I know is somewhat opposite for people because they're like, I don't want to see my people leave and flourish, but like, I really want to see them go on to be the best version of themselves anywhere.
And I honestly think that that's the differentiator right there from a leadership perspective. Understand the value of investing in your people's development and knowing that I'm developing, and you're not the first leader I've heard this from. I've heard this from other very model leaders that I've spoke to in terms of understanding that I want to, a true, effective, amazing leader will appreciate that I will invest in the development of this team member because I feel it is my duty to help them become their best version of themselves and to develop them and to grow and evolve them to the point where absolutely they could go elsewhere. But I like your addition of then make sure that you're creating a work environment that makes them not want to leave.
Yeah.
That it's twofold, but it is a dynamite tip for our listeners. Make sure you're investing and you're building the systems required to be able to accommodate investing in that continuous improvement of all of your team members and taking the time to understand how they want to grow and maybe what they think they want to grow. Your role as a leader is then to show them what they actually could grow into, because a lot of them will cut themselves short. A lot of them will say that I'm pretty sure I could never do that. As a leader, it's your role to hold that mirror up and help them see their true potential and then help them make a plan to make it happen. And if they leave, from a brand reputation perspective, the fact that you're okay with them leaving and you've told them to leave, I have no doubt in my mind that, yeah, they came back. Because that is what will happen, leaders. If you're able to train your people up, invest in them, and help them and coach them into making decisions that are best for them as a person, that in and of itself will help nurture a seed of loyalty that perhaps they will go to try that other thing, but that other thing will never measure up and they'll be back eventually. And I've heard this from other leaders too. So for you to come in and share that story and share that approach just validates that it is a thing. It's truly a thing. So definitely invest in them. I absolutely love that. Any other kind of, I guess, tenets of leadership or just the way that you approach your leadership position that you feel could be shared with the audience in terms of you think that's one of those best practices that you've stumbled on that have made a difference in the lives of your team members and in your culture?
Yeah, for me, and I think it's like, I mean, now that I look back on it, it's like people 101, but everybody's different. Everybody needs something different. You can't manage and lead every person the exact same way. And I learned that one early on, probably a rough way, right? Like I wanted to manage at a very young age, probably the age of 23, 24, became a manager for the first time with no management experience and wanted to manage everybody the same way. And it just did not go well.
That would have been
But,
convenient though, right? To only have to
oh,
learn one approach and one
yeah,
cookie cutter, and then you could just replicate it.
yeah, it would be nice, but it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't
But
like that.
for young leaders and managers out there, I talk to them all the time. I tell them like that's one of the very first concepts you got to learn, that you're gonna have to put time into this. And you're gonna have to understand that Josh needs something different, Lori needs something different. Like there's different ways you have to talk to them, interact with them, how you communicate with them. So that's big for me too. But then also just understanding the person, like what do you want next or out of your life? Because it's unfair for me to have expectations of you that you might not even want for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a struggle for me in my career too, is that I have very high expectations for myself, but then I see the ability of other people to have even higher expectations and higher growth. But honestly, they might not want that for themselves, Lori, and that's okay. So you need to kind of understand what that person really wants in their life to where you can then impact it better that way than trying to force a different path on them.
Absolutely. And I'm hearing two things from what you just shared. One, the importance of not taking a cookie cutter approach, but also mapping out the needs and preferences of each of those individual ways. And of course, for our listeners who've listened to other of our shows, I talk about everything disc all the time. I'm a huge fan of it because it is one of many tools out there to be able to foster that self-awareness, right? It's about understanding that maybe the person who's asking you a ton of questions, the team member asking you a ton of questions in a meeting, isn't doing it because they don't feel like going back to work, which is how I interpreted it for years, by the way, before I started to realize that those people may in fact have a preference and lend towards a need to have information presented to them in a very logical fashion. And if that need isn't met, then they're going to have a bunch of questions in order for them to satisfy that need. So you have to take the time to understand what are the preferences, what are the needs of each and every one of your team members by using tools like Everything Disc and I think Enneagram and Myers-Briggs. All these things are really about creating and fostering that self-awareness in each of your team members and being able to understand it. But then yourself as a leader, you said you've struggled with a few little things over your career from the time you were 23 to now. How can you start to kind of flatten that learning curve? It's by increasing your own self-awareness, right? It'll be a lot easier for you to understand how to better navigate that team, how to better navigate if you're aware of your own blind spots, and then you're able to adapt your approach accordingly, according to your own blind spots, but also according to the team members' preferences and needs. I was giving an Everything Disc workshop this week, actually, and it was all managers, and it's the management version of our tools. And one of the managers said to me, he's like, well, if I know exactly that I need to present this information to them, is that not like to some extent manipulation because I'm packaging the message for them, but with this insight of how to present it to them, I feel like it's almost manipulative. And I'm like, manipulative or being super conscious of what they need and meeting them where they're at, as opposed to you projecting your own language. You call it manipulation. I call it being an effective communicator, ultimately. Because to your point about business, we all need those results. We all need to have those outcomes. And so anytime you're giving instructions at work, if you're doing it through your preferred way of communicating, then it's likely not going to land the way you need it to with every single one of your team members. But if you take the time to understand how each of those team members need to receive that information and you make minor tweaks in your delivery, suddenly all of them got the message the way you wanted that message to land, right? So I love that you've kind of alluded to that importance of understanding and not taking that cookie cutter, and understanding that each team member, the way they want to grow, the way they want to develop, will vary. So make sure, if you obviously, if we have a lot of CEOs and decision makers listening, you might not have time to start to, kind of dig into the style of each and every one, depending on the size of your team. But it's your responsibility to ensure that you're developing and building the infrastructure, the architecture required for your leaders to do that with their own teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you love talking about the disc profile. I would implore everybody to, for your direct leaders, get the disc profile so you understand that. It's not that tough to do. The other thing that I'm big about too is the 5 languages of appreciation. So you understand. I'm huge on that. I've taken, previous company, I took the entire company through that, and we were all in office. It was pre-COVID, and everybody had stickers on their cubicles that would tell you the 2 ways they like to be appreciated and the 1 way that you should avoid how they are appreciated. And that was super impactful to see how much better we already had a great culture there, how much better the culture got over that, because people started being appreciated the right way. Where even me, like, I read that book and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm big on showing appreciation to people, but Lori might not like me in a meeting to stand up and say, Lori, you did just such a fantastic job. But it doesn't resonate. Like, you actually hate it because you don't want public appreciation, right?
Exactly. And the management tool of DISC, that's what we cover. We cover motivation, and what you do to motivate one person, so that rewards, that recognition you provide, may actually be demotivating. Like you said, like, if I'm that person who does not like public accolades, oh my God, that's actually demotivating me, right? And taking the time to understand that. And short of doing that training, here's a really kind of easy one, folks. You all have some version of an annual evaluation, which I hope you move away from, and that's a whole other conversation. But performance development and having a plan in place to help develop and evolve that person on an annual basis, on an ongoing basis. Add that one question. What's your preference when it comes to recognition? Are you okay with public accolades? Would you prefer, that private message, a one-on-one talk? Ask them the question, and believe it or not, they'll tell you. Then you can
Yep.
just make sure that you're adapting your approach accordingly, right? It's
Yep. And
crazy.
what I would say too is, like, once you get better in your career further along, if you're really key on appreciation, you can actually sniff out what people's appreciation languages are, because most of us will default to giving appreciation in what is our appreciation language. So
Absolutely.
like if you want gifts, if you're a gift person, you'll be the person that brings donuts and food and gifts to the office all the time, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But eventually you'll start to sniff out what the different styles are. And I think one of the misconceptions out there is that people all want pizza parties and coffee and donuts. Believe it or not, what they truly seek is actionable feedback. So if you tell someone, good job on that, it doesn't tell them what to repeat. So one of the recommendations I always make is make sure that you're being extremely specific about what exactly was appreciated. The way that you presented that visual to our clients seemed to really give them an idea of the vision we are proposing, and I'm pretty sure that's why we landed that deal. So thank you for putting that visual together. Okay, duly noted. As an employee, I need to repeat that. I need to make sure that visuals, they were a plus. On the flip side of that, when it comes to the constructive feedback, right? Same thing. Be specific. Don't just say like, that didn't go well. Help them understand what specifically did not go well, right? And
Yeah.
then the last point is, it's not all on the leader's shoulders to provide that recognition. Create some peer-to-peer options. I'm sorry, but if I only see my manager once a month and he gives me a good job, but the person I spend day after day working alongside tells me, hey, the way that you help diffuse that pissed off client, excuse my language, really, really saved the day. And I so appreciate that you did that for me. That is a lot more impactful for me than the good job once a month from the manager I see once a month.
So you set this up. We did not talk about this ahead of time. We just transitioned from last year a platform where we gave out recognition and it was totally leadership management. And it was a great platform that where managers got a bucket of points and they could send out appreciation every month and it reloaded. We just moved away from that platform to a pure peer-to-peer platform where everybody gets points and everybody can get. And we've seen almost an 80% increase in the amount of recognition given out because it's a more peer-to-peer recognition platform.
It's more authentic. And now think about byproducts of that. Byproducts of that trust building, that that understanding that your colleagues have your back, they appreciate you, feeling seen and valued by those who matter most at work, those you spend your 8 hours a day directly working with. That's awesome. I maybe offline I want to have a conversation about what platform accommodated creating, because it's something that a lot of our clients do request. They ask for us, okay, I want to do a peer-to-peer. What does that look like? What do you suggest? And I always talk about, there's something about old school. Buy a bunch of blank cards, pass them out, and have people write a personal note. Oh my God. And of course you've got one right there for those just listening on
So my team knows, they laugh, they take pictures of me. I'm an ice cream guy, and I happen to find these thank you cards that are ice cream, and I've got them here. I write thank you cards every week to people.
There you
So
go. Exactly. That goes a long way. And when I was with that same organization for 21 years, we had one of those campaigns roll out, and it was these little thank you cards, and they were blank, and we could write exactly what they were, and we would leave them on the desk. Everybody was assigned 2 cards. We were given a month. They said, we're giving you a month. Our minimum ask is that you give those 2 cards out. Here's a pile of them if you want to give more, but at least 2. And I still have my pile. And when I'm having a gross day where something has went really horrible, I'll pull them out and I'll look at them as a means of, oh yeah, that's right. This is not, it's not the end of the world. This is just a bad day. And now I get to continue. So those little cards will have a number of ripple impacts that will go a long way in terms of fostering that collaboration, but also just tending to that mental well-being and people feeling seen, heard, and valued. And this was absolutely not set up when we had our pre-chat. We didn't even talk about recognition or any
nope,
of this.
not at all. This is funny.
That's the beauty of not being scripted for these. I think there's some really valuable nuggets of wisdom just in that conversation itself that should be retained by our listeners, and making sure that you're doing recognition, yes, but make sure that you're taking the time to customize that recognition, that you're providing the tools and the systems to facilitate that continuous flow of recognition and feedback, be it constructive, be it positive, just making sure that you're building the infrastructure they need for that to be occurring on the regular. One of the things that you did share with me when we did have that chat prior to, and it's exactly where I was actually going to go initially with this entire conversation, but I really love this sidebar that ended up being brilliant. You talked about how you helped them weather kind of that transition, and some of the symptoms that crept up, and how you managed that transition when you did go through the acquisition. Would you mind sharing with the audience a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm heavy on education. Again, people focus, but I'm really big on people understanding the why and being educational. And through, all these acquisitions, what typically happens in an acquisition is, businesses come together, and when businesses come together, there might be two people to do the same job, and you don't need two people to do the same job. And it's just the reality of business. But even also from an economic standpoint, everybody knows there's been economic uncertainty in 2023. There's economic uncertainty in 2024. So in 2023, we did have to unfortunately lay off some people, and had that conversation with them. And those are tough conversations, but my approach is I'm out front on everything. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm not going to be one of those CEOs that just sends an email and you can't touch me. Probably it's my own fault a little bit too much sometimes. My door's open for people to have access to me, but that's just the nature of who I am. And
Bad thing, but yeah, I can see how it can become problematic.
yeah, and it's not for everybody. Don't get me wrong. Like my style is not for everybody, and there's other styles that aren't for anybody either. But for me, my happiness is just I gotta be true to who I am and like let that come out and be very human with people. So that we went through that earlier last year, I guess. And I just held a town hall. Held a town hall, told them what went on, but we were very educational about what took place and why and how they were going to feel about this and what that meant and it was okay and that we would work through that with them. But also making sure that they understood that although there is a very heavy people focus for us, there is a financial component to every business. And that's kind of how we started. We teed up earlier on in the conversation that there is a financial component to every business. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those talk about revenue, they're talking about gross margin, they might be talking about EBITDA, whatever those numbers are, but you need to make sure that your employees understand what those things are. And if you do take the time to truly educate them on what they are and how that also impacts them in their personal lives, then you would get a better buy-in and understanding of anything you ever have to do positively or negatively from an employee perspective. And what I mean by that is how I explain it to them is I broke down EBITDA and we explained what EBITDA meant to them. And we had questions about it, and some people were upset, and I get it, and they're like, oh, it's all about profit. I'm like, well, it's not about profit. EBITDA doesn't mean profit. There's other bills and debt and things that you have to pay out of that. But also, I just made sure they understood. Like I asked very pointedly, like, do you have stocks? Do you have mutual funds? Yes, I do. And I said, okay, well, like you're investing in businesses that then care about their EBITDA, and if they don't do well, then you don't make money on your stock. And you could see light bulbs start to go off in people like, oh, like I get it now, right? And what's been interesting is like that's a very challenging time for a business to go through when you have to do something like that. Mm-hmm. But culturally, we were so worried about like what was going to happen. We saw our culture become even stronger in some aspects days later because they understood why the thing had to be done. But also I explained to them, Lori, I told them like, I have a responsibility for everybody here, not just some people. And what that means when you run a business, and it's a very difficult situation to be in, it's one that you don't really think about a lot when you become a CEO, is that there might come a day where you have to make that decision. Am I protecting the group of people or do I protect a certain subset of people? And I was just transparent about that unfortunately we had to, reduce staff to protect the greater group of people. But what I can also tell you is those people that exit the business, I would hope that many of them would say, I reach out to every one of them. I did whatever I could to try to help them find jobs, like all that stuff. Like we were totally bought into like, we're going to do whatever we can to take care of you. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. Not every business can do that because I also see sometimes you see these businesses that are 30, 40, 50,000 people big and they're laying off 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that CEO should be trying to find every single one of those people jobs. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a human component to all of this, and you can be a lot more human about it.
I think what I was hearing is the importance of being human. And you said you saw improvements almost immediately to the culture. Why? Because people were trusting you. They understood that you were real, that you were human, and that you were making decisions that was in their greater good, right?
Yeah, and that's tough to see sometimes in the moment, right? Because maybe your friend or colleague or that you really enjoyed working with was no longer going to be there. It was interesting because somebody asked me, and my town halls are open. Like people ask questions, all that stuff, and somebody had mentioned like, where's the good news, right? And I actually said that my last comment was, I do have good news, but for me to share good news right now would overshadow the people that are important to us that are unfortunately losing their jobs. I feel like that would be a disservice to them. And I meant that because like too many times that's what I do see is like whether it's that type of situation or any other type of negative situation from a business, people try to quickly overshadow it with some good news. Yeah. And like I don't feel like that's the right approach either. And it actually doesn't work either. Like psychology wise, for every one negative, you actually have to do 4 equal or better positive things over a period of time. So one of the worst things you can do is something negative happens, you try to cover it up immediately with something positive. It just doesn't work. It actually exacerbates the negative.
I absolutely agree. The other thing it does is when I hear stories of the feedback sandwich, when, oh yeah, I know how to give feedback. You give it in a feedback sandwich. You put a positive, you insert the negative, and you put a positive. I'm like, no, never do that. Please, let's be done with this feedback sandwich. Why? Because it conditions the response that and minimizes one, the impact of that negative. 2 out of 3, I'm not doing too bad. Perfect. Am I really going to need to change? No, I'm already, doing too well. Really, that's fine. And then what it also does is suddenly people are thinking when they hear a positive, they're waiting for the negative. So it also, whether you realize it or not, minimizes the impact of that positive too. So definitely, I love that you were able to have the foresight to say, I do have some positive, and there is some stuff that's a bit more, kind of hopeful. But I feel that this isn't the place or the space to share it in light of what we've just shared. And that's incredibly powerful and a great insight for leaders out there. Think about if you do have to deliver that more difficult news, that more sensitive news, then be respectful of what you've just delivered and don't try and cover it up and I guess balance it out with a positive because it will fall short of the outcome that you seek in doing so. So certainly give that place, that other news space, give people time to crystallize and to digest it, give them support in terms of navigating the aftermath of that other less positive news, then slowly introduce additional insights that might have provide a bit more hope. The one you keep referencing town halls, and I'll be honest, that's another one of my aha moments, and I know we need to start wrapping this up, but I just want to say when you talked about the frequency of your town halls, I thought that in and of itself was a bit of a unique differentiator because I've heard of companies that some of my clients will do annual town halls, which are good, but they seem to be very condensed and intense because there's a lot of information to share. And then I've seen those who do quarterly town halls. That's not what Logically does, right?
No, I started January of 2023. I started a monthly third Tuesday of every month. I lead it, I run it, a town hall for the entire company, and we typically have we're a service org, so people have to be on the phone, so not everybody can attend, but we record them, and we have 80% participation rate every single time, and we have a very structured format though, but I lead it. I give business updates. I talk to them about some development stuff that I would like to see from the organization, things that are coming down. But then we have different department leaders give up and they give a 5 or 10 minute about updates about their department. We do service wins, sales wins. We do a training component as well because we have everybody there. So we're going to do a training component when we're together. And then we do ask the ELT, which is my executive team, and they can submit questions and we'll answer away. So every month, and they're an hour long, and I try to run them. I'm trying to be very timely with a strict time frame because I know that I try to make sure people can get out of the office on time if they want to. But we're actually thinking about going to 2 a month, and one of them will be our senior leaders will actually run that town hall, and it will have a different format because one of my strategic pillars for 2024 is to grow an expanded leadership team. So I'm trying to mentor and coach them, and that would give them an opportunity to kind of run their own format and their own meeting for their organizations.
I love it. I absolutely love that. Also, from tips listeners that I heard, if you're going to do them monthly, they're only an hour because rather than having to fit 3 months or 12 months into one meeting, you only have the previous month's kind of successes to celebrate. I like all of what you touch on. It's structured. You try and keep yourself to that 1 hour. You talk about celebrating wins, giving a bit of insight of what to expect, what's coming down the pipe. You use that opportunity to train and to educate on something that the entire org can benefit from, as well as just provide general updates and that each of the different departments provide their update. That's brilliant because one, it also helps everyone stay connected, understand what this department is doing and what they're working on and why I need to do this and how that's connected to their work. It's about fostering that sense of connectedness, which will avoid that feeling of silos, which of course often will lead to that complete checked out, disengaged status. So Thank you, Joshua, for everything you've shared. I could continue chatting with you, especially now that you just shared that one of your pillars was leadership development. I feel like I could talk for another hour just on that, and how companies can develop and build a system that actually supports and equips their leadership team with the tools and the skills required to manage their people. But that could be for another time. I'm so appreciative of people, of you coming on and sharing. But if people would like to find out more about Logically or just want to connect, what do you suggest? How do you suggest they do that?
Yeah, sure. If they want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So just look me up, Joshua Skeens, at LinkedIn, or go to www.logically.com as well. You can find me on the website.
And if someone's heard you talk and you've shared so many insights about Logically and what they're about, and suddenly they're interested in working, is it on the website as well that they can?
It is. They can reach out about working at Logically right on the website.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for joining me. Listeners, as I say every single week, I hope that you enjoyed our episode, but more importantly, please take the time to digest what you've heard, and of all these wonderful nuggets of wisdom, please choose one action that you could start to do today and go do that. Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guests, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.